You're about to enter into a new world of knowledge, curiosities, and high strangeness. This is a podcast of Straight Up Strange Productions.
You're listening to Mysteries and Monsters. I'm your host, Paul Bestel. Back in 2020, I had the chance to speak with one of the most diligent and pleasant ufologists in the arena, a Mr. Peter Robbins. Sadly, I'd always thought that file had been corrupted until last week when I accidentally stumbled across the original interview I had with Peter. So 5 years on, as a Christmas treat for you all, to thank you for your continued support throughout the years, is that lost interview with Peter. This episode is being released in the week that Linda Napolitano has passed away. Linda, of course, is one of the most well-known experiences of the last 40 years, whose case became notorious even before the most recent Netflix hatchet job. Peter and I discussed that, amongst many things in this interview, and I hope you enjoy it. So I hope you can settle back and welcome Peter's long overdue interview for you all. Merry Christmas, and thank you again. It's been a while since we entered the world of ufology, and who better to join us than one of the leading lights in the field, Peter Robbins. Peter is a man of many talents who has illuminated the field of ufology for years. An investigative writer, author and lecturer, there are few aspects and cases in UFO investigation that Peter has not been involved in at some point. Peter, welcome to the show, sir. Thank you for joining me.
I'm glad to, Paul. Good to be back.
For me, sir, you are probably one of the most illustrious ufologists that I am aware of. You are someone I've wanted to speak to for a very long time, and I found it quite amusing that it was the fact that you'd been bumped off another show that kind of landed you in my lap. So, and I've been quite fortunate since I started doing this show. I've made some really good friends in the field of ufology, especially in the UK. I never thought I would be able to say that I've become friends with people like David Clarke and Philip Mantell, who both got into ufology through a general interest. Whereas, as far as I'm aware, Peter, you were actually drawn into it through a personal encounter.
Yes, that's correct. Actually, more directly, I was drawn into it by the return of a childhood memory of an encounter, a very unambiguous daylight sighting that occurred with my sister Helen above the village we grew up in, about 30 miles east of Manhattan. And what we observed coming in at a high rate of speed and stopping over the neighbor's house was nothing less than 5 silvery white disc-shaped objects in a very precise V, as in Victor type formation, elliptical, like each one like holding a dinner plate at a distance, not circular, but elliptical. They were metallic, and they were close enough that we could see regular detailing around the edge of each, which when we finally compared notes more than 14 years later, because that memory was good and dormant, we both agreed the only thing we could compare it to was like windows on a commercial airliner at an appreciable distance. I had a very overall happy, innocent, protected childhood. It was a far more innocent time, certainly here in America. And at that age, 14, I was still very much a kid. And my only take on the subject of UFOs or flying saucers was in the B movies that I would go see on Saturday with my geeky little friends and laugh at and, enjoy the fights between them and human beings. Yeah. But looking up and seeing them there was the most shattering moment of my life. I guess I intuitively understood from the adult world that, yes, they were real in those kind of movies, but they weren't really real. And that if you thought they were, ridicule attached. And I was struggling, like most, adolescents too, with just wanting to be, accepted and not having to be seen as some weirdo or anything.
Yes.
And I remember precisely, and I have relived this 3 times in regressive hypnosis with 3 different practitioners, including my main mentor, Budd Hopkins, that I looked up and my mind basically went through something that I've come to call the checklist reaction and have had repeated to me by certainly well over 100 people that I've interviewed over the decades of you're minding your business, you're doing what you're doing, and you look up and you see a thing or things, and your logical mind goes, not a plane, helicopter, kite, blimp, dirigible, balloon, strange-shaped clouds, birds, reflections from the ground. What am I looking at? And for me, I kind of hit the wall inside myself. It was too intimidating. I genuinely felt kind of the bottom fall out of my life, and everything that I thought I knew was now open to question, and it was not a good feeling. I was overwhelmed. And to cut to the chase, because it is rather a complex story, later that afternoon, my sister came up to me and asked me if I wanted to talk about it, and I said no. And the weeks became months, became years, and it became the repressed memory of my childhood. I joke with people sometimes and say if I have other repressed memories, I don't remember them. But it was 14 plus years later, as a young painter in New York City, that memory returned with a vengeance. I could go into why I think it happened when it happened, but I guess the main reason is I was ready to deal with it. And later that afternoon, after composing myself, because it completely shook me up, I phoned my sister. I lived in New York City's Chinatown, and she lived a mile or so north of me in the East Village, an aspiring poet at the time, soon to become a songwriter and performer, that a memory from childhood returned. And I was afraid if I simply blurted it out, she'd say yes or no. So I said, let me set the scene, which I did. Weather, location, where we were standing in relation to each other. And she cut me off mid-sentence, said, I know what you're talking about. Told me what I remembered, with the variable of she wasn't sure whether it was 5 or 6, causing me that afternoon to do my very first drawing painting relative to the subject, which I showed her the next day, and she agreed it was 5. And in that conversation, she then told me, but there's more, and described to me what is now an archetype of conscious abduction-related memories.
Yeah.
This was 1975, Paul. I had nothing to pin it to. I didn't even know there was a thing called ufology. I knew nobody who was interested in the subject, and I became obsessed with it that day. That's how I got into it.
It is remarkable as well, Peter, because it's one of those things. There are a couple of strands to this that are very interesting for me, primarily because it seems, because we come across this kind of situation or response to an incident where inexplicably someone has an experience or witnesses something that is so remarkable that it challenges the very foundations they've built their life upon.
Yes.
And they go and tell someone, but during that sort of 10, 15 second process, they seem to just go, do you know what? It's all right. I'm fine. And I find that incredible that there just seems to be that earth-shattering realization to it's gone. It's remarkable.
Yes. I couldn't agree with you more. And I've had people occasionally over the years say to me, wait a minute, you're saying you saw a couple of UFOs and it completely changed your life and derailed your career? Yes, it did. First, my sister and I, Helen's gone now. She passed in 2000. But we were particularly close siblings, always had each other's backs. As adults, we were roommates for many years, edited each other's work, shared a wide body of friends as artists. We could not have been any closer. And I knew my sister wasn't a liar. In that moment where she told me her still conscious memory, she never forgot. But she never felt compelled to talk about it. When I asked her about that in that initial phone call, she said, I obviously had a very different reaction than you. And when I reflect back on it, I choose to think of it as it made me feel special. However, how come we never talked about it? you made it very clear that afternoon, obviously, that you didn't want to talk about it. You're my brother. I love you. I respect you. And here we are all these years later. But that dual obsession of what the hell did we see and what happened to my sister drove me into a life that I did not choose, certainly consciously. An interesting life, to be sure, but I still have a certain amount of resentment. I knew what I wanted to be from the time I was a boy. I was a very precocious artist. I studied art. I graduated from and taught at the finest art school of the United States for many years. I was starting to make it as a young painter, and all of a sudden it all derailed, and something more important had come into my life, and I resented it. But I felt I had to follow it.
Yeah. I mean, I've often found that as well. And it is something that I've often seen in people who find themselves pulled into ufology rather than want to go into it through an interest, Peter. Is that, for me, I've often been, or I've found it remarkable that a lot of people seem to be rather talented artists. I've got to know somebody here in the UK who is one of those people who probably should have been an artist if he'd lived in the right area and the right environment, if that makes sense, Peter. But he didn't.
It does.
No. He grew up in an area where that kind of career was looked down upon, shall we say.
Yes.
However, through ufology, he's ended up embracing his love of art through his work through ufology. Understood. So it's very interesting to me. It's almost as if the fact that you have a cognitive talent in such a way that you are able to create such wonder, because I love art. I'm a massive fan. I prefer some strange things. I'm more of a William Blake dark.
Yeah, you're after my own heart. An amazing visionary.
Very much so. And I kind of love that, the way it makes me feel. And I appreciate art from all kinds of formats. Not necessarily always my cup of tea, but I'm always insanely jealous of anybody that can put anything on a canvas, regardless. So I've often found that remarkable, that a lot of people seem to have a talent or have suppressed a talent until something's caused it to burst out, Peter. And this seems to be something very similar, I feel. Yeah.
I will say that thankfully, not only have I never lost my love of art, I will go to any museum whenever I have the opportunity, haunt the galleries, still maintain friendships with many people who are actively in the visual arts. Expect that I will be drawn back into it in the near future. And it's interesting that we are talking about this right now. A Colorado-based producer who has become a friend of mine approached me about a year and a half ago to work on a segment for what would have been a television series that he was developing called Aliens and Artists. And plans continued along, and had the virus not changed all of our lives, a film crew would have moved in here in April to work on my segment. He was wonderfully adaptable, though, and after the fact decided, until he can do it as a series, he was going to do it as a podcast. And last week, the first of an extensive 2-part interview with me went on air, and today the second part goes on. Your listeners can Google it. It's Aliens and Artists, and it is essentially a 2-hour interview with me around what happened to me. Because when I say my career derailed, overnight I became as obsessed as Richard Dreyfuss's character in Close Encounters of the Third Time, making the Devil's Tower out of mashed potatoes, and I couldn't stop doing UFO drawings and paintings, and it was not pleasant. I started to branch out again after that, continued to teach for years, but the heart had gone out of it, and it's never gone away. It's just been dormant. And my creativity transposed itself into writing, investigation, and research. But I have finally set up an area to work in my house, and starting to unpack supplies that I packed up 40 years ago. And will not leave this work, but will move back into that realm.
Well, excellent. I think that's something it's one of those things that I think, if anything, the last few months, Peter, has allowed a lot of people to either return to something they love or to actually try something that they may have been afraid of prior to this. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, nobody's watching.
That's a very good observation, Paul. I agree with you.
And I've said this to a lot of people. I mean, one of my joys is doing this, because I get the opportunity to speak to people like yourself, Peter, from around the world. And regardless, I'm not trying to pretend I'm, on an intellectual level with anybody I speak to. I'm just genuinely interested. And I think I just would like to speak to the people that I've respected and read about and seen and appreciated over the years in these particular fields, Peter. And I think, if anything, I know a lot of people have found the situation quite peculiar. Myself and the show, it's been quite positive for us, because we've seemed to have found a nice little niche somewhere, which I'm always appreciative of anybody who wishes to listen to me whittle on, Peter, regardless. So I think it's an interesting time when situations like this occur, because I think you can go one of two ways. You can either embrace it and try and use it for the positive, be it on a personal or spiritual level, or you can let it grind you down, and that's the worst thing I think you could possibly do. So fight back by whatever means you wish.
I agree, and it's one of the reasons why we need more broadcasters like you out there doing what you do. The implications of other intelligences, visitations for the human race cannot be exaggerated. And had the coronavirus, again, not taken over all our lives early this year, in terms of major announcements, breakthroughs, acknowledgments on the part of the mainstream scientific community, acknowledgments by the United States government, which has always been reticent to do so, would have made this a banner year. But they've all kind of gotten lost in the shuffle to a degree, unless you've been keeping your eye on it.
Yes. It is remarkable, because even off the top of my head, Peter, and as we speak here, it's the beginning of October. So I think 2 days ago they announced that they'd found frozen reservoirs of water under the surface of Mars, and they think there's 4 of them, but they know there's definitely 3 of them, which is a remarkable discovery. Regardless, 2 weeks ago we discovered gases in the atmosphere of Venus.
Venus, yes, methane.
Yeah, which can only be produced by life.
That's right.
And that's on top of the fact that the US government admitted that the 8-it videos were correct.
Yes.
And it just seems remarkable that we've had such a massive leap in regards to the perceptions or the acceptance that the possibility of life on other planets or in other parts of the universe, regardless of how you view that concept, because I think a lot of people fall down, for me, Peter, personally, is that I think people think of life as they're expecting to come across something that's us. And I find that a little bit peculiar, because the universe is so vast and so strange and so wonderful. Yes. I would be more surprised if it is something similar to us than something that we cannot possibly comprehend.
I agree with you, Paul. Even from the get-go for me, and I've always considered myself an open-minded person, not so open that my brain falls out, but I can be convinced of new ideas or change my positions or beliefs if evidence is presented to me that I can accept. I'm a pragmatist, and as an investigative writer and researcher, I'm fairly plodding. You triangulate evidence, different kinds of evidence. And for me, I approach it like an attorney or a law enforcement officer of a case that I could bring to court, rather than, say I have secret connections in the intelligence community, or I get channeled messages from Martians, or so many other things. And who am I to say that people that claim such things are inaccurate? Part of the challenge of this work is sorting through the nonsense. Almost anyone can claim anything, and the next person over cannot prove empirically that they're wrong. And there is so much specious nonsense out there. But what we're looking at right now is a growing interest, which I now will acknowledge, because I was waiting for the other shoe to fall, that since latter 2017, the ridicule factor that has been so deeply attached to accepting the basic premise of life out there, coming and going from here, or here, one dimension away, or what have you, seems to have dissipated to a point in the media, in social realms, governmentally, that we have entered indeed a new era. And many, many people, and I can say this for a fact, who 10 years ago would never have breathed a word to a colleague, an associate, small talk at a cocktail party, to a friend, a relative, that they do take the subject seriously, now care less and less what other people think about what they think about the subject. And that's a very healthy thing. We're still a good distance from what I would call a critical mass within the world population. We still are very much in a minority, but there is movement. And who knows, at some point, something may happen on the part of us, or as likely on the part of them, where it will become undeniable. And then, hello, brave new world.
Very true. And I think something we have in common, Peter, because I've heard you mention this before, and I'm always delighted to meet a fellow appreciator of one of my literary heroes, which is Sherlock Holmes. I've heard you speak eloquently about your love of the Rathbone and Bruce films, which are some of my favourites. I watch Hound of the Baskervilles every Christmas. It's a very strange tradition I have.
I've loved Sherlock Holmes' character since I was 12 years old, and have read just about everything, have a small Conan Doyle library, and the idea of deductive reasoning for me has informed everything I've done in this work.
Absolutely. It is remarkable because, I mean, one of the things that's always struck me, one of the tenements of Holmes, is that when you've eliminated the impossible, however improbable, must be the truth remaining. And I think, Holmes was the archetypal. He never fell for anything, and a lot of Holmes' story, The Hound of the Baskervilles is a prime example. On face value, a family in the south of England are cursed by a terrifying demon dog, Peter, that will come and take the Earl of the Manor and do away with him. And I
know the story well.
Absolutely. And yet, when Holmes digs into it, it's clearly nothing of the sort. However,
that's right.
It's still a remarkable series of events, because you've got all kinds of. I'm not how anybody doesn't know that story. I don't know, Peter, but I'll not spoil it for anybody. But and yet, I've often found that people will often ignore remarkable evidence, Peter, because it's outside the boxes of comprehension.
It also makes them extremely uncomfortable.
Yes, very much so. And I think, as we've touched on there, because of the remarkable things, did you honestly think, I mean, I'm really surprised right now, as you've touched on, that we seem to be in a golden era of enlightenment when it comes to the acceptance of ufology and people being more open-minded and willing to discuss these subjects.
Agreed.
Did you, I mean, obviously, the last 3 years, it seems like it's been on a fast and rapid moving conveyor belt to taking us wherever we're going to end up on this, Peter. As someone that's been knee deep in this subject for so long, and I mean that in the nicest possible way, are you surprised at how quickly things have changed in the last 3 to 4 years?
I am, in the sense that, having entered this field with a certain amount of shock and total unpreparedness 45 years ago or thereabouts, I've observed cycles every 4, 7 years or whatever. Something seems about to break. A particular story becomes almost unavoidably acceptable. A understanding or a belief that an announcement's going to come, an indication in popular culture, and then it simply goes away. So I've simply become wary and skeptical at those times. And I had hoped. Logic would suggest that we should assume that sooner or later that would change.
Mm-hmm.
But when things started to change in the autumn of 2017,
mm-hmm.
in great part because of a series of articles that were published in the New York Times. And I can tell you, as somebody who extensively researched the subject of the history of ridicule attached to UFO studies
Yes.
in a very pragmatic way, I think I'm probably the only person, certainly in the field that I know, who has downloaded and read, going back to the analog era when I would be working at the main branch of the New York City Public Library and the New York Times newspaper morgue out of old ledgers, every single article, editorial, commentary, feature, letter to the editor, photo caption ever associated with the subject. We're talking well over 230 items or so since 1947 that informally, I'd say 97% of those reports were condescending, sarcastic, specious, belittling, and every once in a while something would break through and then close up again. But I'm pleasantly surprised that it seems that it has now, that pattern has been broken. And we are in a much better place to see the whole subject be taken more seriously by not just all of us, but by movers and shakers, a number of whom have always taken the subject seriously, but even world leaders and billionaires are sensitive to ridicule. And in literally every case that I've documented, bar a very few, they have backed down, gone away, denied, and disappeared back into the woodwork for all too human reasons that I understand and commiserate with.
I mean, there is one case that always springs to my mind, and I re-watched an interview, I think from the 1980s. Peter, you may be aware of this. I'm, not trying to trip you up or anything here, sir. Which is the infamous Knowles family case from Australia in Nullarbor.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing about this case, and I'd never seen this interview. And there was an interview, I think, done at the time on Australian primetime television, where they basically humiliated this family live on television. The presenter was just absolutely ripping these people to pieces to the point of, I don't know what pleasure he was getting out of it. It's one of those things. It's that mob mentality, Peter. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
You hear a couple of chuckles and you play to those chuckles. Within a moment, you've gone past the pale, and it's essentially you're basically beating people to death live on television, and it's one of the most uncomfortable pieces of television, regardless of the veracity of this family's experience. Though I find it very hard, once again, that you will get 5 people all lying and backing each other up, because their story is very remarkable, Peter, and I'm sure you're aware of it anyway.
Yes.
That alone says to me, why on earth would anybody want to go through that, ever?
Well, you've hit on something very important, which is that it takes real courage to go forward in public and say, this happened to me, or I saw this, and damn the consequences of my saying it. Mob mentality kind of captures the feeling. There is strength in banding together with other frightened people, or people whose fairy tales that they live by, or their understanding of the world as they've come to appreciate it through their education, religion, family, world around them, has been tightly wound, and they don't have the ability to accept that things are different than the way that, quote unquote, they know them to be. That's the difference between a skeptic and a debunker. A skeptic, and we should all maintain a healthy sense of skepticism, especially people like me, because if I get it wrong, it can cost me in my career, and God knows I have gotten it wrong, and I have paid a price for it. Debunkers have the arrogance to, again, quote unquote, know that, for example, the UFO phenomena, truly anomalous UFOs, are not real. And we are either alone in the universe, or I'll be open-minded and say, yes, there may be life out there, but there's been no indication thus far. And every single bit of what you as wonderfully innocent believer put forward as proof can all be explained away by me in the following manners. Budd Hopkins, arguably the father of serious scientific investigation into the most complex, fascinating, troubling, threatening to the existing order area of UFO studies, namely the legitimate abduction phenomena, which is as real as you and I talking right now, Paul, observed on a number of occasions that when an abductee or an experiencer or somebody with a profound life-changing sighting goes forward in public and has the courage to stand their ground and say, this happened to me, and it's real, and I can even prove it in certain ways, that up until recently, mass media, society at large, governments indirectly will come down on them. How dare you embarrass the patriarchy, or the fact that it's always been this way, or the fact that we don't want to hear about this, and you're bringing it forward in all its ugly reality. Our reaction is not to respect you and honor your courage by looking into it, but to come at you with all we have for embarrassing us culturally. It stinks.
Yeah, very much, and it seems to appear in anybody that's come forward. I've had the privilege of speaking with Calvin Parker,
a great guy and a very perfect example of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and he's one of those gentlemen. I mean, he's so down to earth. He's the complete antithesis of the debunker's reason of why anybody would want to come forwards. And Calvin's situation is very interesting because he was so put out by what he'd seen going on with Charles that essentially he just withdrew, regardless of the fact that there were several people who had clearly witnessed something at the same time, which has obviously all come forward since he's sort of thought, to hell with it, what's the worst that could happen? And yet that seems to have occurred with every major case I can think of, Peter.
I'll take it a step further. Charles Hickson, the gentleman who had the abduction experience with Calvin, who's gone now, but he was a good friend of mine. And I met him and we became fairly close when he came to New York to work for a period of time with Budd Hopkins in hypnotic regression. Charles wrote a very powerful book called UFO Contact at Pascagoula and always stood by his account. It made him sad and frustrated, but he appreciated what had happened to Calvin in Calvin's being in public denial about the event and having a rough time with it. I was so intrigued by that dynamic, although I had observed it a number of times in the past, that when Calvin invited me to come down to Pascagoula, Mississippi, and as a New Yorker, a place as foreign as a foreign country to me, to walk the walk with him and see where it happened and relive it with him, I didn't hesitate for a moment. I am only sorry that Charlie didn't have the opportunity to see Calvin emerge from that denial and to have the courage to go on the record and more, working with a dear friend and longtime colleague of mine, Philip Mantle in the UK, to produce an absolutely marvelous and very readable book on his experiences, and even take it a step further and begin to tour and speak. Now that I've had a chance to spend time with Calvin, who is one of the most, he's a perfect example of an incredibly decent guy who is not, a sophisticate or did not do this to become famous. It was what he knew he had to do. And I have nothing but admiration and respect for him, for his terrifically supportive wife. I wish him a long and happy life, and I couldn't be prouder of him, and I know Charlie would feel the same way.
Yes, it's a remarkable story. I mean, it was very interesting as well, because I almost got the opportunity to meet Calvin in person, because he was due to come over last year for the...
Oh, I know. It was very disappointing to him that he couldn't. In fact, I was supposed to be
this year
in the UK last month.
Yeah.
And obviously that's all been pushed back, but I look forward to returning to the UK for the 20-something time next year in August for the big conference in Hull.
Yes. Get yourself ready for that, Peter. I don't think many things can get a man ready for Hull. As a Yorkshireman, yes. I'm allowed to say that, Peter.
Hey, I love Yorkshire. I love a lot of parts of the UK. I don't want to have to defend myself about any of my friends there.
Hey, don't worry, I'll do that. Don't you worry. All right. But it is interesting, and like I say, Calvin's a smashing chap, and obviously once you realise that the story is a lot more, because it's only because he's come forward that we now know he had more than one incident, and
often the case.
And yet it's a real shame, like you say. It would have been lovely for Charles to have been there to see this happen, but it is one of those things. And I think when we have notable cases such as this,
yes,
often, I mean, Pete Phillips' diligence is incredible, because Philip's been so good in regards to shining a light on cases that perhaps have been overlooked or forgotten or just put back on a shelf, Peter, and left.
He has, not just as an investigator and longtime researcher, but in more recent years as a publisher, and I couldn't be prouder of him for doing that as well.
Absolutely. I don't know what they're putting in the water in Yorkshire at the moment, but we clearly seem to be pushing the boat out a little bit, because obviously Philip is a fellow Yorkshireman as well. So clearly Yorkshire is the UFO hotspot in the UK at the moment. And obviously my hometown, Sheffield, we've got David Clark. So
yes,
it is remarkable that I never thought how many years. I mean, I've had a wonderful thing arrive in the post today, Peter, which was a book that I read as a child when I was like 6 or 7, called The Usborne Guide to Ufology.
Oh my!
And it was released. There was a series of them. There was ghosts, UFOs, monsters, and they were incredible books. And when you're 7 or 8, they were the best books in the world. And they basically just dropped out of print. And then last year, there's on the internet, there began a bit of a campaign to get the Ghosts one re-released. Essentially it caught fire. And they sold 8,000 copies in 24 hours.
Oh my.
Re-released it. The UFO one has just been released, and it was released yesterday, arrived today. So I thought that was quite apt that we were having this conversation, and that arrived in my letterbox this morning. And it just took me back, because that was the first time I'd ever heard of the Hopkinsville Goblins, Peter. You know, this is a book written in 1977.
Yes.
But they've reprinted it as it was. So in the back, you've got J. Allen Hynek's address to write to.
Marvelous. I love it.
And MUFON and Before and anyone you wanted to write to, they basically just reprinted it as it was, which is just a lovely little thing.
I am, as a avid reader, I am also a maniac bibliophile, and it's one thing I would encourage anyone to do with a growing interest in this subject. The internet is fine. It's miraculous. It's like the mind of, the universe right there, but there's so much crap on it. And it troubles me as a reader from childhood on how fewer and fewer of us are reading extensively for either pleasure or knowledge. But there is such a deep satisfaction in not just reading about this material in a book, but building an actual library. And one of my proudest possessions is just that. A very extensive, very large library, which certainly contains hundreds of books on the UFO subject and other subjects that interest me. And that is something I will never stop doing. So good for you for getting that volume.
I'm a bibliophile as well. And if you asked my partner, she would clearly tell you I buy far too many books for 2020. And
yes, exactly.
And I'm sure my postman agrees as well. but to hell with them. I've always loved reading, Peter. It's one of those things since being a child and getting into Marvel comics and things like that. I've loved to read, and Sherlock Holmes and Tolkien and things like that when I was a kid.
I was going to say, I am a film maniac and have been since I was a little boy. Had I not studied and intended to be a painter, I think I would have gone into film. But often a subject has come to me and I become interested in it because I saw a movie. Holmes is a perfect example. My Nana was a big fan of the eternally wonderful Basil Rathbone, Nigel Bruce variety of the Holmes films, which I still adore rewatching. Of course, we've had Jeremy Brett and so many other great actors capturing these roles.
Yes.
But without having that adult enthusiasm drawing me into that world of film, I don't know if I would have started to read Holmes. And as part of my library, I have a good collection of important 20th century American novels. And it didn't occur to me till some years into I was avidly collecting them that 9 out of 10 of them were books that were made into films. And that defines that part of my library.
Yeah, it is very interesting. I mean, it's a double-edged sword for me because it was the Rathbone and Bruce films that got me into reading Holmes.
Yes, me too.
But it was the lack of a full version of Lord of the Rings that got me into reading Tolkien.
Ah, interesting.
Which works both ways, because obviously in the 70s there was the cartoon version that finished sort of, I don't know, 3 chapters into the Two Towers. And when you're 9 and you've just seen this amazing film, you're like, well, where's the rest of it? When's the rest of it happening? And so my mum just bought me the books and just went, well, there you are. And that was it. But it's something I've always, because I think sometimes people think you either love cinema or you love reading. And for me, I've always embraced both of them equally, because there are so many films from that Holmes and Watson era of Rathbone and Bruce. My love of Orson Welles and the Universal horror films, and and The Third Man. I mean, there's wonderful screwball.
And for me, as a young American studying film at the School of Visual Arts in New York, another part of my life exploded when I was exposed to all of the Ealing Studio comedies and British humor, which for me was miraculous and still is at that level of the game. It's just been a wonderful part of my life. One could also really has to acknowledge the phenomena in terms of returning younger and not so younger people to the world of reading for pleasure that exploded around us with the publication of the first Harry Potter novel. It kind of missed me on a certain level, but I was absolutely joyous to see how it turned a good part of the non-reading world back into readers. And I will always hold Ms. Rowling in the highest regard for her tenacity and creativity and storytelling. And of course, the films that then were responded to by people wanting to read the books more. It's a beautiful cycle and something that we can always use more of.
Absolutely. I'm always appreciative of anybody that can encourage anybody to read. I think it's a wonderful thing.
Indeed.
And it's one of those things, like I said to you earlier, Peter, as someone that loves comics, I'm very protective about people who are snobby about comics, because it was comics that got me into reading. If it wasn't for Stan Lee, I probably wouldn't be having this conversation. And Marvel Comics taught me more about the world.
When I was a boy growing up in New York, for me it was Superman. 10 cents per comic book was big money at the time, but you'd read them until they fell apart. And then by the time I was an adolescent, we had a wonderful comic book company called Classic Comics, and they took every great novel imaginable and did a comic treatment of it, which could be at a lesser level how you would cheat in your junior high school class and make believe you had read the book, but for many of us thrust us into the world of real literature, of wanting to read that great novel that had had such an impact on the world. Comic books are a very important part of both of our cultures. And anyone who is too snobbish to acknowledge that really has not had the enjoyment of indulging.
For me, sometimes it seems that some people just like to draw the fun out of people who enjoy reading, Peter, and especially in this day and age. And it's one of those things, and it works both times. I see it quite a lot online as well, where someone will say, "What's your favourite TV program?" And then someone will say, "Oh, I don't watch television, I read." Or then someone will say, "I don't. What's your favourite book?" And someone will go, "Oh, I don't. Books are boring. I just watch TV." And I'm just, I think we're both coming from the same kind of way here. That for me, I think they work hand in hand.
I agree. We are most decidedly over the past maybe as much as 10 years entered into a true golden age of television production, and never more so than the attention it has right now when we're all hunkered down. But these are complementary things. Unfortunately, for so many people, busy people involved in, making a living and the like, they have gotten out of the reading habit if they were ever in it. And we are more and more in a short attention span, visually oriented world, and one where production values in film are so extraordinary right now when you can't tell, something that is CGI from the real world. Unfortunately, it has also displaced, for many people, the ability, the desire to sit down and watch what we would call a black and white movie. They simply don't register for them, which I think is a tragedy. For me, the Turner Network here in the States, which runs roughshod over more than 7,000 classic, primarily black and white films, is one of the greatest archives in the world. I have very limited cable where I am. I have Netflix and Amazon Prime, and that's it. I don't have the nightly news. I can watch YouTube on television, but if I had Turner Network, there would go the rest of my life. So it's a double-edged sword. But the internet is not a substitute for great films and theater. And I encourage my colleagues and friends who are as deeply involved, as obsessed with the UFO subject as I've been on and off for decades, to remember that, you need to live a rounded life. And there are so many wonderful things for us to take in this world. It doesn't make you a less serious investigator or researcher or author to develop these other wonderful passions as well. And it's one of the reasons why, some of us will only ever get old in terms of the way our bodies play tricks on us, but our minds are still as open, alive, as filled with wonder in certain respects as they were when we were, I believe the term is young or younger.
Very true. Now, before I let you go, Peter, because I know you're a very busy man, there's one particular case that I know you worked on a lot that I've always wanted to kind of have a chance to speak to yourself about. So, which is obviously, I think most people would know it as the Brooklyn Bridge case. Now, this seems to be one of those cases, Peter, that for someone like myself, for me, it's one of the most compelling cases of all time.
Yes.
And yet, I don't think enough people know about it.
Yeah. I think even many people who know about it find it so challenging in terms of the claims and allegations made and the actual proofs put forward overwhelmingly by great investigative writer, author, and artist Budd Hopkins, who was the person who spent more than 6 years of his life dedicated to investigating this case. And I, as his full-time, part-time assistant throughout that period of time, also was more involved in that investigation than any other investigation I've ever been involved in my life, save Rendlesham. The the place to go to at least evaluate the best body of information on this story, which revolves around a woman named Linda Corteil being a pseudonym, who since 1989, when she first presented herself and her experiences to Budd, has not only been a friend but a good friend of mine, and a friendship that I maintain to this day. A woman who grew up in an old-fashioned Italian-American neighborhood in Lower Manhattan, who had UFO-related abduction experiences from the time she was very young. And in the most famous of them was literally floated out through a plate glass window from her bedroom at about 2 a.m, and her apartment, where she and her husband still live, has windows, ironically, one set facing the Brooklyn Bridge and the other set facing the site of the old World Trade Center and the new building that has replaced the two that went down. And so many witnesses came forward. It's New York City. The fact that it's 2 a.m. means nothing in terms of people who are up and out there, who wrote to Budd detailed accounts of what they saw from their vantage point, whether it was on the loading dock of the New York Post or on the Brooklyn Bridge itself, crossing over, seeing this fully articulated disc hovering right above that point, about the 12th floor of this apartment complex. And many folks, their reactions was, not surprisingly, they're obviously shooting a movie. How are they getting that amazing special effect? But seeing Linda in her nightdress and several beings as well, kind of rolled up and literally going through that plate glass window, molecule by molecule, and going up into this craft, which then disappeared and dove into the East River, reemerged later out on Long Island. The very important person who was involved as well challenged the beliefs of a lot of people, even though he never denied it, and Budd met with him at the time. And that was, at that time, the Secretary General of the United Nations. If it was just even a matter of seeing the X-ray, and unfortunately, it doesn't reproduce well as an illustration in the book, which, by the way, is called Witnessed, the true story of the Brooklyn Bridge UFO abductions. Up in Linda's nasal cavity, which she had decided to have removed and had scheduled that procedure, and it happened that night before, and no medical personnel were involved in doing it. That X-ray for me is one of the most jaw-dropping, and I'm talking about the original celluloid X-ray that you'd look at, against a fluorescent backing. But I've known Linda now for over 30 years. She is salt of the earth. This was not an enjoyable process for her. And it had happened to her mother. These things overwhelmingly run through family bloodlines, the abduction phenomena. And unless one really studies the literature or evaluates the evidence for yourself, it, of course, sounds so far-fetched that it's much more comfortable to dismiss it as a fantasy or a presenting sign for psychological aberration or a combination of physiological effects, sleep paralysis combined with this, combined with that, except that it's real. Again, 6 years of my life was caught up in that investigation, and I will always stand by the results and the conclusions and the evidence that Budd so eloquently and brilliantly presented in that book, and always stand by Linda in the authenticity of her account.
What's always struck me about the way yourself and Budd evaluated the other witnesses, Peter, is that I think a lot of people aren't aware that Budd was a very talented artist himself, which is, I think, is how you actually connected, because you'd seen him in an art directory, I think.
Well, actually, I knew his name. The New York art world is a rather small place in a big way. But Budd, less than a year after I became deeply involved in this subject, was himself getting deeply involved and had published his very first article on his very first investigation, which appeared in a New York weekly called The Village Voice, which I happened to walk by a newsstand and see in headline and did a double take, bought it, went home and read it. It was the best thing I had ever read, the most well-researched, the most best presented, the most pragmatic, a brilliant investigation. I had no idea it was the first time. And that there could be two Budd Hopkinses in New York, one an artist and one a UFO person, both spelling their first name with two D's.
Yes. Yeah.
It was the old days, and I went to a New York City phone book, and there was only one in that book, and I called him and introduced myself to him as a fellow artist with a profound interest in the subject, who had had a childhood sighting, whose sister had had an experience. And it's a worthy digression here to take this minute or so. His first question to me on the phone was, "Tell me about your artwork." Budd was a late period abstract expressionist who had evolved from there. I came of age at the time when post-pop, minimal, and conceptual art were dominating the scene. He was not thrilled when I described my work to him, but he was curious enough about my sister's experience that he invited me over for coffee. And the next week I went over to his building on West 16th Street, and we'll never forget, Paul, the experience of sitting at his kitchen table in his wonderful loft apartment, drinking coffee with him and talking about art life and UFOs, which is the title of his brilliant memoir published in 2008, and never imagining the hundreds of cups of coffee I would have at that table with him over the next 35 years and more than a few shots of scotch, and that this would become one of my dearest friends and most important individuals in my life. But Budd was a brilliant self-trained investigator. I sometimes would think back that if he had gone to law enforcement instead of the arts, that God help the criminal element in New York. But in evaluating some of this evidence, which came to us in the form of letters, and I should stress here, if this was some Machiavellian conspiracy, each letter was almost all of them were handwritten or typed with different typewriters. Each one of the witness ones contained a drawing. And for two artists to evaluate, and I say this with great respect, an uninformed, unsophisticated drawing by a witness, whether it's a child or an adult, and then when you've got enough of these drawings and you compare them to each other and you realize you're looking at the same thing, even to the lighting sequences, based on where they were and at what angle and at what distance when they saw it, it was a tremendous thrill. And many of those witnesses gave Budd permission to include their accounts and supporting evidence in his final publications. Others did not. But met with many of these people where they wanted anonymity and or completely not to be included, but they wanted answers. None of them were interested in making money on this, an important mark of a genuine witness who is obsessed with what happened to them or what they saw.
Yeah.
And again, I can't stress strongly enough how that kind of evidence as part of your triangulated picture, along with firsthand testimony, physiological evidence, a history in certain families, multiple viewings of the same situation as it's happening from different angles, etc., goes to create the strength of the investigation that you finally publish.
Yes, and plus I suppose it gives you an ability to kind of remove any sort of preconceived ideas, because I think a lot of people always say when somebody puts forward some evidence as a secondary witness to an event, Peter, that there's been some kind of unconscious bias.
Well, yeah, it's a very important point, and it's one of the reasons why the best people in the field, and something I've tried to adhere to, although not always successfully, is with each new investigation or query. And it can be something like the Linda case, the Brooklyn Bridge case, or Rendlesham that goes on for years, or sitting with somebody hearing their account in the corner of a lobby of a hotel at a break during a conference. One should enter it not just saying to yourself, I know this stuff happens, so I'm predisposed to already accepting that this is real, as opposed to, I am a skeptic. And, you seem sincere, but your anecdotal testimony is not enough to make me say, yes, this is real, this is true, and I will champion this case. It's a trap that's easy enough to fall into, especially if you're somebody like me who, after decades of physical evidence, firsthand accounts, having my own childhood experience, photographic analyzed evidence, film analyzed evidence, that you reach a tipping point where you realize you no longer have the luxury of disbelief. And belief per se can be, again, a very double-edged sword and something that does not necessarily serve you.
Yeah, it's one of those things, Peter. I've always kind of been taken aback when people put that forward. So it's remarkable. And I suppose it stands you in good stead.
Yeah, well, you do your best. We're all human. We have frailties. Anybody can be taken in, no matter how cautious or skeptical you think you're being. There are people out there whose intention is to not tell the truth,
yes,
to create a false impression, to simply fool you, for all the reasons that exist. I find overall they are in the tremendous minority, but you can't proceed in this work without being aware that they're out there, or that your own preconceptions, or that your own desires to believe. For me, so much of it comes down to that wonderful iconic text we were all introduced to in the pilot episode of the legendary program, The X-Files. I want to believe.
Yes.
We all want to believe something is or isn't so. And that belief, fight against it as we may, will work its way in and try to inform our conclusions. And so one has to be wary of it and work with a very decided sense of countering it in the Holmesian sense with deductive reasoning, critical thinking, and your own good common sense as you move forward in looking into anything that you find of interest and worthy of investigating.
But I think the other aspect of this, Peter, before I let you go, I think sometimes people are very harsh on themselves in regards to situations like this, because in my experience in life, it doesn't matter what you do in life, we will always come across these people who create false narratives or try to ingratiate themselves into our lives or a scenario or a situation. And I have seen it in all walks of life,
yes,
throughout my entire life as an adult, Peter. And I think sometimes it's often frustrating that when it comes to subjects such as ufology and the paranormal and cryptozoology, it's as if they're the only parts of the world where people lie. And we know right now, we know that that's simply not the case.
Of course. And, his expression here in the States, maybe of the equivalent there, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. It's, the attention seekers, the loudest, the most flamboyant, the most outrageous. And it's another reason why, even if you are looking to inform yourself on the internet and you see a great piece of video, does it name the person that shot it? Does it give you the time of day, the kind of technical equipment that was being used? Has it been analyzed by somebody who has the background to pass judgment on imagery? Because anything, of course, can be fake now, and brilliantly so. When I first got involved in this work in the mid-'70s, and nobody really, certainly no layman, had a dream of the world of digital photography and film that awaited us, a fraud in terms of a fake photograph could often be spotted by taking a 10-power loop or magnifying glass, studying the purported image, and actually seeing the edge of the paper cut where the craft, so to say, had been glued down on the background, or where the string that the model was hanging from would show up in a polarized analysis under ultraviolet light. It was a much simpler time, and one could do a certain amount of that kind of concluding on your own. We live in a different world now. And again, because there is that desire to believe, all the more reason that claims and all the wonderful alleged video clips and stills of alleged truly anomalous phenomena need to be taken with a grain of salt at least, and wherever and whenever possible, subjected to full scientific photo analysis.
Well, Peter, on that point, I think that's a good way to park it, sir. Where can everybody keep up to date with you and follow your investigations and your work, sir?
Well, to embarrass myself, you can go to my hopelessly several years out-of-date website, which we'll see some changes soon enough, and that is peterrobbinsny.com. If you are on Facebook, I am the Peter Robbins who is listed as a resident of Ithaca, New York, even though I live just outside of it in this beautiful part of central New York State, and I keep folks up to date on what I'm doing there. However, and allows me to end with a certain note of mystery and drama here, I have been developing a project, Paul, since February or so that will see the light before the end of the year, which will be a major shift in the way that I am out there and doing my work in ufology and in broader subjects as well, that I'm very excited about, and that I will be breaking, or the story will be breaking for me in the next month or so. And I hope that you will invite me back to be a guest again, perhaps before the end of this year, so that we can pick up where we have left off and discuss this new project of mine, and hopefully draw some people into following it.
Absolutely. Peter, you are always welcome, my friend. You just give me a nudge and I will make time for you, sir. Simple as that. So the Aliens and Artists podcast is what you're currently being interviewed on as well?
Yes. Again, that's it's a wonderful series with artists, and I have the honor of doing a back-to-back pair of interviews. The first one aired last week. The second one airs today. And I'm sure you can chase it down with a few clicks on Google, Aliens and Artists. It's a wonderful series. And hopefully, if we beat this damn thing next year, the producer will come back to his brilliant original idea of doing it as a documentary film series. And I very much look forward to that. That's I guess my most recent out there project, but others are percolating away right now as we speak.
Fabulous, and I look forward to seeing whatever you've got up your sleeve. And I do indeed as well, Peter. I hope we do get through this damn thing, because I'll take you for a coffee when you come to Hull next year, sir.
Oh, I'll look forward to it, Paul.
Well, listen, I'll put links to everything in the show notes for you. And once again, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure and an honour speaking to you finally, Peter.
And mine as well. And be well, Paul.